Can the health minister tell me when the clinic promised in the budget for St. Stephen will happen?
While not everybody has a clinic promised in this next year, yours is one of them.
I believe that they don't like to look out their back window and see a parking lot, and they question if that's really the best use of the space for the community.
Conversations about a seasonal ferry and the timing of the seasonal ferry, those have been looped in with the longer term conversation.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look back at the top stories of the week from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
This week actually began on Sunday with the call of the federal election. Canadians will be going to the polls on April 28th. What do you make of this first week of the snap election and campaign season?
This is going to be an extraordinarily pivotal election for Canadians, probably one of the biggest in my memory, and I've only been on this earth for 31 years, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think the biggest question on Canadians' minds right now is which leader has the right capabilities to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump, his administration, and this trade war. And I think all of the issues that Canadians will be thinking about, their health care, especially affordability, the things that they're finding when they're going to the grocery store or when they're going to the gas pump or when they're looking at their utility bill, they're going to be distinctly tied to this trade war and the things that are happening and those tariffs. So I think the biggest question on Canadians' minds will be who can work this out to get to the end of this trade war.
I think we've been anticipating an election for so long, but the trade war has thrown a wrench into what we were already anticipating. So it's changed the dynamic quite a bit. And I think as journalists, it makes it exciting. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it definitely makes it interesting to cover. And then you take those issues that you're talking about, affordability, and when you bring it to our riding and go to a place like Campobello Island, where they're paying tariffs now daily on basic needs when they have to get them from the U.S. to come in, it really does intensify what other Canadians might be feeling in a place like Campobello. So we will definitely hear questions related to tariffs when we do our Meet the Candidates night, but more on that later. I wouldn't mind talking first a little bit about our riding, which we've known to be New Brunswick Southwest for quite some time. It's now called St. John, St. Croix, and the riding's been redrawn a little bit too. So some communities that used to be a part of this riding are in a different riding now, some going up to Tobic-Mactaquac. So it does change the dynamic a little bit now that our riding goes into St. John, and St. John West specifically. Can you tell us a little bit about which parts of St. John we're taking into this riding?
Yeah, so it'll be West St. John, a very urban, industry-heavy area. West St. John is where the Port of St. John is. That's where American Iron and Metal is. It is where some of the demographics of this riding are really going to change. And when you take in an urban area into a mainly rural environment, the needs are going to be different. And I think candidates in this new riding of St. John, St. Croix will be challenged to kind of figure out what that looks like and how those needs have changed and meet them in the middle, because they are very distinctly different needs.
And I know that McAdam, for instance, was originally going to be left out of St. John, St. Croix. They made a case and are still a part of St. John, St. Croix. I know they feel they have a lot of connections with Charlotte County, even though they're a little further away. So they felt it was important to be a part of this riding.
There's identity tied to geography, and we saw that even with municipal reform here in New Brunswick. People were distinctly tied to the names of their communities and the geography of their communities. It's very important to rural identity, but also urban identity, to kind of maintain where you are in the world. And so that redrawing of the boundaries might have been a bit destabilizing to some communities, but we'll see how it works out when they go to the ballot box.
We have places like Burton up near Fredericton that will be a part of this riding now too. So that'll be interesting to follow as we go into after the election to see how the dynamic changes. But I do want to talk a little bit about our role in the time of an election and the fairness aspect that comes into play. I know we did a story Tuesday for our news about the candidates that were already in the race. But we are careful in campaign season when we're about to go to an election to make sure we give all candidates equal time, same questions. It's very specific guidelines, the ethics for television journalism specifically about how we cover candidates. So you'll notice that if perhaps a candidate's having a night, we might not necessarily be there because we'd have to get to every candidate's meet and greet. So it's very, we have to be very, very, very cautious to make sure we don't give anyone an unfair advantage.
Yeah, and equal time and opportunity will be afforded to candidates throughout the election. That allows within our resources. We have to really think about what's the best possible use of our resources during this election campaign, this very short election campaign, but also in that same breath, allowing Canadians and the residents of Charlotte County and St. John St. Croix to really understand what their candidates are offering them, what they're expressing that they will do for them in Ottawa, and let them have a fair decision about who they want as their representative in the House of Commons.
And luckily, this isn't our first rodeo. We do meet the candidates like it is second nature to us. So we were prepared for this. I talked to Michelle Vest at the Garceland Civic Centre last week, anticipating that we would be in this situation this week. So I can tell you now at home, April 11th, that will be our Meet the Candidates night for St. John St. Croix. It's taking place at the Garceland Civic Centre in St. Stephen. It's where we hold pretty much all of our Meet the Candidates events. And I will be moderating. I'm looking forward to doing that once again. And how that process works. If you haven't been to one of our events before, we invite all the candidates. So every single candidate for this riding, they're given 2 to 3 minutes for opening, the same for closing. The questions come from you, the public. We vet them before the event, make sure that we merge them into 7 to 8 questions that have with the threads of themes throughout. So we make sure if maybe 50 people write in the same type of question, we'll merge that into one question. And then we alternate who goes first from the candidates, again, for fairness. And it will be open to the public. It will be televised as well. But if you are in St. Stephen on April 11th, please come out. There will be a studio audience, which always makes things interesting. We ask everyone to remain quiet throughout, though. No cheering, no booing. We want to really have a level of civility throughout this campaign season, just so that I think that to the candidates, it can be a very trying time. I think all of us see what's going on online, and so I think if we can hold ourselves to a higher standard here in Southwest New Brunswick, maybe we can be an example to others as well.
And I'm really interested to see what the public is going to ask. I have infinite curiosity about what matters to New Brunswickers and what matters to the folks here in Southwest New Brunswick. I think what they really want to understand is what their candidates are going to do to make life better. The cost of living has continued to be something that is weighing on Canadians' shoulders, especially in New Brunswick. Rent is as high as it's ever been. So I'm really going to be looking forward to those submissions of questions so we can look at them and actually bring the questions that New Brunswickers want asked at Meet the Candidates.
I think cost of living was on everyone's mind even prior to the tariff, so it'll be interesting to see how those questions are worded from the public now as we have this additional aspect to overcome. If you do have a question for the candidates, we're taking them now already, and the email is candidates@chco.tv. We will get all those emails from the public, and again, boil them down to the top 7 or 8 questions that we see as the themes throughout all the questions we receive, and the candidates will actually hear them for the first time at Meet the Candidates night, so they won't have an advantage of hearing the questions beforehand.
And it's important to note that if you write a question, it may be rewritten to be more fluid and more easier to understand. So just because you don't hear your direct question doesn't mean we haven't taken it in and then asked it. It's just in a different format. So I just wanted to make that clear to folks that sometimes they'll write us and they'll say, well, it wasn't exactly what I said. Well, we're just trying to adjust it so that it's succinct and that it offers enough time for candidates to digest the question and answer it in an appropriate form and fashion.
I'm very much looking forward to to this night. It will be your first with us, so you'll be up for seeing the excitement that happens at one of these events. It is quite exciting, and it means a lot to be a part of doing a Meet the Candidates night for a riding, because I think in this day and age, especially in a snap election, pulling off something like this isn't always possible for every single riding. You often get to see those debates with the leaders, but ultimately who you are electing is your MP. So it's nice for us to give our viewers that opportunity to see who exactly it is they will be voting for and then make their decisions after. I know that I always do. I wait for Meet the Candidates night. You never know what you're going to hear.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with This Week Uncut.
If someone wants to come along and needs parking, there might be 2 or 3 cars along the street. At one time, maybe.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. Now we're going to go right into local news, Nathalie. In St. Andrews, let's talk about a story we actually did last week on the parking lot proposal over by Langmaid Park here in St. Andrews.
Yeah, so just to be clear, this hasn't come to council yet, so there's been no debate or discussion about whether this proposal could move forward or not. It's kind of still in the ether, so to speak. But residents approached CHCO-TV a few weeks ago to discuss their concerns about a proposed parking lot across from Langmaid Park on the end of Water Street that would run parallel to the Van Horn Trail. Now, these folks, all 7 of them, all 7 townhomes, came to us, and they're all kind of concerned about what this might mean for their property. And it was funny when we interviewed Darlene Ferguson. She said, this might seem like our backyard, but we consider it our front yard because it's a very wide open green space. And so this new parking lot is about 24 spaces. Ideally, it would provide parking for the Van Horn Trail and for the downtown. And what's important to know about that is that council has talked extensively about the fact that they're challenged with parking downtown during peak summer months, and they're looking for solutions that will help alleviate that pressure. We want to welcome tourists into the town of St. Andrews during the summer. It's a beloved place that people come year after year after year, and they really do see this area, this parking lot, as a solution. And so the residents raised concerns about how it might impact their lives. They want it to remain a green space, and they did present to council.
And it was and again, it's public land, the green space. It's designated green space, but it's public land. And where exactly does their line border with this space?
Yeah, so according to the picture that we have, or the renderings that we have, which we'll bring up, it runs, I think, about a quarter. So the property line really runs to about, it's kind of like a little marshy part, so a little like a wet part. And so that's the divide, and then the town's land kind of comes up a little bit again. So it's shared land, but the part that is where the parking lot is going to go is public land. And so there was some confusion about whether it was public land because the residents actually mow a certain part of that property. And so they were kind of like, oh, is it public land? Is it not public land? The area that they're intending to use is public land. So, and they proposed that they would like to see it stay a green space, but they were asked by council during the presentation what they would want that green space to look like, or what proposals they would have in opposition of the parking lot. And they really didn't have too much ideas. They thought maybe, we could extend Langmaid Park across the street. And so there's just general concerns about that parking lot.
Okay, and when do we expect to see this debated at council?
It hasn't really come up on the agenda that I'm aware of yet to date. It could come up in the next several meetings. And this parking lot could be a solution to the parking woes in St. Andrews. And there's been some dispute about how long it takes to walk from the tip of the Van Horn Trail to kind of the beginning of the downtown core. In the article that we wrote, we used a pretty universal measurement, which is Google Maps, which estimated it was about a 10-minute walk, 750 meters to 800 meters, less than a kilometer. But some people could walk that faster. Some people will walk it slower. It just depends on your capabilities and your stamina, so to speak. And so I went out, and I interviewed Darlene Ferguson and the mayor of the town of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson.
I live right here in the garden homes that are behind me. Beautiful spot, lovely green space.
And I just wondered what your thoughts were when you first heard that potentially there could be a parking lot set up in your, what you described as your front yard.
Well, I, of course, wasn't very happy. We don't have people that need parking here. The trail, it's utilized all summer by the Kiwanis campground people. Families, dog walking, joggers, hikers, they all use this trail in the summertime. So they don't need to park. And if they do, if someone wants to come along and needs parking, there might be 2 or 3 cars along the street. At one time, maybe.
So you don't think it would be a feasible solution to the concerns that they have about downtown parking, which is that there's not enough?
No, it wouldn't be advantageous at all. Can you imagine parking here, walking downtown, and walking back again? I believe it's probably 1 kilometer to go downtown and come back. That's a little bit much to ask. And even with someone with a family, having a baby in a stroller, a little one beside them, walking downtown and back, it's not even feasible.
And you said you went to the public consultation. Did you get any kind of feedback or anything that was helpful from the town?
No, not really. We suggested another place, and they said it wasn't a desirable place to have it.
We did talk to the Fergusons earlier this week just about their concerns. So what did you make of his presentation tonight?
Yeah, so they are residents that live in the area, and they are opposed to the parking lot. They would prefer to see it green space. We did ask specifically what they have in mind for green space, and there is no official response other than some personal opinion. But for the most part, they do not think a parking lot there would be a good option for the downtown or the trail. But they also did express concerns that if it was successful, that it could double in size. So there was just concerns in general. I believe that they don't like to look out their back window and see a parking lot, and they question if that's really the best use of the space for the community.
Do you think it's the best use of space?
I'd have to, look at council. I don't actually have a vote in this matter, but I will say that green space right now, there is a number of residents that actually weren't aware that it was public green space. They thought it was someone's backyard. So either way, I think we need to do a better job of letting people know that that is space that they can use and enjoy.
Is buffering something council could consider if they intend to put a parking lot, perhaps shrubbery, trees that they could maybe, I wonder if there's solutions where you could meet in the middle.
Oh, they're definitely buffering is an option if council decides to proceed. I do think that if council was going to proceed, they were going to look at options like that. But right now, we're just letting council digest that, and if they want to proceed or not, I'm not sure. I have heard varying answers in response from council. I think some think it's a wonderful idea, and some might be opposed to it, but it's no different than what we're hearing in the community. I personally don't doubt that if a parking lot would be there, if it wouldn't be used, I'm pretty confident it would. If you look at the other side of the trail, that parking lot is used well, but in the same sense, is that the most ideal location? The municipality is looking to expand parking for the downtown. That's something that council will have to consider.
Well, and you guys have talked extensively about how difficult it is for parking in the summer and for folks who are coming to enjoy St. Andrews. So, I mean, what other solutions do you have? I know he presented an alternative parking lot, I think, kind of behind the townhouses. Are there other options that you could consider?
Yeah, there is multiple options, but it doesn't mean because you do one, you don't do both. We have a major parking concern in this community, so multiple solutions will have to get us there. There's not going to be one golden solution that solves the whole problem. You will need multiple options. One option I have heard is potentially continuing the parallel parking up King Street. We have talked to the Legion before, which that lot is currently not being used, about a potential partnership there. So there is things that we're looking at. I think that the thing that was attractive about this potential thing is the fact that it doesn't cost the taxpayer near as much money. If you look at existing lots that are owned by other people and the price of real estate right now, in order to get a parking lot close to a downtown, there's no way you can do it under $500,000 of any substantial size. I heard even online, I saw it, like people are like, you should have bought this, should have bought that, demolished it and put a parking lot. Well, these buildings are all selling for $750,000. And then by the time you put the parking lot in, and the other thing is, are you going to wreck some of these heritage buildings that have been in our downtown for for a while. So some of the things that obviously you see online are probably not reasonable, but this was an option of a space that was owned by the public that could be public parking that was a low cost solution for the community. But with that being said, we definitely want to hear from the community, and I think it's important to note that where this all sparked from is the municipality actually had a public engagement session, an open house. We are open for feedback. It's a proposal. It doesn't mean that it is going to happen or not going to happen. We want to hear from the public, and council will make a decision on it.
That was Darlene Ferguson and the mayor of the town of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson, speaking about a parking lot proposal at the end of Water Street. And we're going to continue to follow that story when it comes to council. So there will be more coverage to look forward to. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with This Week Uncut.
Kind of didn't answer my question. When can we expect a clinic in St. Stephen? One of these collaborative care clinics that were promised in the budget. Thank you.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. We are heading over to St. Stephen, where there's talk of a new community clinic coming to light this year.
Yes. In the Legislative Assembly, Health Minister Dr. John Dornan was questioned by Progressive Conservative MLA for St. Croix, Kathy Baucus, who is well known in the community, about this clinic. She also mentioned, that the community is struggling with healthcare right now. There was a prominent doctor who has passed away and has left his patients without primary care. So all of those folks will go on a list to be eventually matched with a new primary care provider. But St. Stephen was among the 10 areas that were promised a collaborative care clinic in the first 18 months of the Liberal mandate. So what that means is collaborative care clinics bring a bunch of different healthcare professionals together, doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, social workers, together to kind of provide primary care and improve outcomes and health for New Brunswickers. So in that question, which we're going to take a look at, she said, when can we expect it? And he confirmed that contracts have been signed and that clinic will open before the end of the year.
I recognize the member for St. Croix.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My riding is in a dire situation following the death of one of our few family care physicians. Dr. Bhagwandan's practice is now closed, and his patients have been notified they can obtain their medical files by contacting a company which is charging them $95 per person for the files. My question to both Horizon and to the Minister of Health was, can the government not provide a subsidy of some sort to help with the cost to these patients? Many are seniors on a fixed income. Also, where are the patients supposed to take the files when they get them? The answer from the Minister was, simple grants won't fix this. Working with you and the community will. The Minister says a clinic in St. Stephen will be one of the first 10 planned, and he is hopeful of progressive steps soon. Thousands of my constituents without doctors are also hoping. Can the Health Minister tell me when the clinic promised in the budget for St. Stephen will happen?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, thank you. There's not a single member here today who does not want a collaborative care clinic in their town. And the member opposite does recognize that this is one of the first 10. And so this is one of the reasons why we need to do collaborative care, because right now with the solo practitioner that leaves their practice and no one's taking it over, the charts are left in a profitable venue. This is not good. You should know that when your physician retires or goes on holidays or is replaced, that those charts stay in that clinic accessible anytime here ever after. So you illustrate a point why we need collaboration in our care, and I'm glad you've thanked us for putting one of those clinics in your community first. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member for St. Croix.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, you kind of didn't answer my question. When can we expect a clinic in St. Stephen, one of these collaborative care clinics that were promised in the budget? Thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We have committed to starting 10 clinics in this current calendar year. St. Stephen is one of those. So I think I've given an answer. It's within this year. We have already signed contracts with groups of people that are putting together these collaborative care clinics. So while not everybody has a clinic promised in this next year, yours is one of them. So, you know, it's not tomorrow. It's before the year is out. So thank you for your question. I'm glad I was able to answer it.
That was MLA for St. Croix, Kathy Baucus, and New Brunswick Health Minister, Dr. Dornan. It's interesting to hear Kathy make sure she got that commitment that we will have a clinic in St. Stephen this year. It really does show her journalistic skills still at work. Kathy was a longtime reporter for The Courier, actually. So interesting to see that she still got those skills in her back pocket to make sure she get that date confirmed.
Yeah, and it's important that folks understand that there's a lot of work being done by both the provincial government and the municipal government to really ensure primary care is a priority in St. Stephen. And it comes at the backdrop of the municipality actually last night approving a policy in its original form to come for 3 readings and a vote eventually on incentives for healthcare professionals. They're going to provide $100,000 for doctors and nurse practitioners to come to St. Stephen in a 5-year commitment paid at $25,000 increments, which we talked about in our last episode of This Week Uncut. And, you know, it's interesting because while the provincial MLA is advocating for these collaborative care clinics from the provincial government, which is their responsibility, the municipality is now bleeding into areas that it shouldn't necessarily have to, and take money away from things that it should be spending money on to ensure that its residents are healthy and they feel healthy, and healthy people provide better outcomes from the municipality. They spend times doing things in their community. They go out and do things in their community. And so it's very interesting to see this dynamic of push and pull between the provincial and municipal governments.
Yeah, but definitely when you see that a municipality step up to the plate, it's because these problems, when you're in the community, are very real. When you have a doctor pass away who is the doctor for many patients in your town, that has such a huge and immediate impact. And then you have to factor in, I know that we have a wellness center here in St. Andrews, but my doctor is in St. Stephen. There are a lot of us from other communities who are still traveling to St. Stephen for a doctor visit. So it's not just St. Stephen being impacted, it's those of us who travel there to see our family doctor as well.
And municipalities in Charlotte County are creative in how they're trying to kind of manage this newfound responsibility of providing healthcare to their communities. Here in St. Andrews, as you mentioned, the wellness clinic is offered at its current space by the council for free to kind of ensure that it exists and that it's not burdened by the idea that it would need to pay rent or what have you. In St. George, they contribute $25,000 to the St. George Medical Clinic in the mall there. So councils, again, are just really trying to make sure that their communities have what they need to kind of thrive in their communities and stay in their communities as well. And according to the Department of Health, more than 18,000 people are yet to be matched in Zone 2, which spans from St. Stephen to Sussex.
You know, and always an interesting thing to consider is that when people don't have access to health care when they need it, that means things go unchecked. And those can be more, if you are into the economy, that can become expensive. Just from, obviously we care about the health of individuals, but for people who see numbers, that's a problem too. These health issues can go further along down the line. It's something we saw in COVID-19 when people weren't going to see doctors regularly. But when you come into a situation where you just don't have a doctor, things can go unchecked.
Yeah, and the administration of MDSS is very excited and eager and encouraged to hear that the minister is committing to opening that clinic by the end of the calendar year. Chief Administrative Officer Jeff Renaud is one of the families who lost their family doctor in the death of that local physician. So it really is everywhere. No one is untouched by the crises that the healthcare system is facing right now. Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with This Week Uncut.
I thought that I was going to be coming here to say there's no new news on tariffs this week until yesterday when the President of the United States decided to add a 25% tariff to automobiles made outside of the U.S.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
Every week we are participating in conferences with Premier Susan Holt regarding tariffs. I know that anyone who's been watching them regularly knows we have asked, I think, every week about Campobello Island's unique situation. This week, one of the issues that islanders were facing on top of the tariffs and on top of border restrictions tightening is that schools from other parts of the province that school children would normally be playing sports against, them coming to the island, islanders leaving the island, these other schools are no longer wanting to go through the United States to get to Campobello. Now, we're at a point in time that the ferry won't be running for another 3 months, the privately operated seasonal ferry. It's a great ferry. So what we wanted to find out today from Premier Holt is, given the situation that's ongoing, if the province, since we don't have a year-round ferry commitment yet, that's something that we're trying to see if there's any movement on, perhaps if the province is maybe considering what happened during COVID-19. In COVID-19, the province funded the seasonal ferry to run all year round. So this was that conference, and here's what she had to say.
I thought that I was going to be coming here to say there's no new news on tariffs this week until yesterday, when the President of the United States decided to add a 25% tariff to automobiles made outside of the U.S., which certainly impacts Canada. Alors, il y a des choses à discuter aujourd'hui, pas seulement ça.
So things to discuss today, not just that, but it starts with that. So the President will be applying 25% tariffs for cars fabricated outside the Nova Scotia. It may not outside the U.S. This will have an impact certainly on Ontario.
As a leader in manufacturing and exporting automobiles, and I think, as David Campbell has said, when Ontario sneezes, New Brunswick gets a cold. They are our second largest provincial trading partner, and so when the Ontario economy is reduced or struggling, that have an impact here. Businesses in New Brunswick should be aware that if they are supplying into the automobile industry or affected by the impact that this is going to have on Ontario, our team's tariff relief package is available to you. So the programs that we put in place, and I'll describe them a little bit later, those exist to help businesses through this tariff war. And if the tariff war has now moved to automobiles and Ontario, then as that impacts New Brunswick businesses and workers, the programs are there to support you. The other one that I want to touch on that was the new tariff as of last week, but I want to provide some updated information on, is the Chinese tariff on seafood. I appreciate that there's been perspectives shared from New Brunswickers about what we should take off of Chinese tariffs, and those are being discussed with the federal government. There is a broader global reason for some of the choice of Chinese tariffs in relation both to the U.S. and others, mais le support est encore là. Alors pour...
But certainly there's still support for them in New Brunswick. It's especially our seafood industry. The federal government had announced the last week that there will be support for those that are impacted negatively by the Chinese tariffs.
Income supports to fishers and farmers impacted by the 25% Chinese tariffs on canola oil and seafood. And the provincial government's tariff relief package that includes funds to support the seafood sector through our Atlantic Fisheries Fund is also there, available to support you through this period. And that's a DAF-led program of grants to help companies, big and small. So I know there are some small processors and fishers that think that this might not be for them, but you can be a small fisherman in New Brunswick, and if your customer base has just been impacted in China and that's impacting your price or your sales, then the Atlantic Fisheries Fund and the team at DAF is here to support you. La troisième chose que je vais parler, c'est...
The third thing I'll talk about is support for municipalities. I was with the teams, the municipalities teams yesterday.
Of mayors and councillors with the Union of Municipalities yesterday, talking about many things, including tariffs. And there are many municipalities concerned about the impact of tariffs on their communities. and not just border communities, but also communities that are wondering about the increased cost for them of purchasing products that may be on the import tariffs list. So we wanted to reassure those communities that within our tariff relief package, there are funds to support the companies, the municipalities, the organizations that see an impact to the tariffs, and that sits with RDC. And there's also a remission process. So if you're exposed to an import tariff that Canada has placed on a good that's critical for your municipality, because we're collecting those funds as Canada, you can have those funds remitted to you to cover the additional cost of that purchase. And the federal government has reassured us that that remissions process will be very timely. And if you reach out to our team here, we can help walk you through that process. Alors, je veux rassurer la municipalité qu'il y a des supports.
So I want to let the municipalities know that we have plans for them as well. So I just want to sum up quickly, because we talked about tariffs on cars and Chinese tariffs and for the municipalities.
$62 million 5-part tariff relief package that started off with supports for workers, people who see their jobs or their hours impacted by tariffs. That there's supports through PEDAL to help you through any disruption in your employment. And then we have the programs to support businesses impacted by tariffs. And so there's a working capital program to help if your revenues are taking a hit because of a decrease in purchases, in this case because of the steel and aluminum tariffs and the cost that those will put on your business. There is also our competitiveness and trade diversification and productivity package. So the team at Opportunities New Brunswick is there to support you as you look to invest in your business to become more productive and as you look to reach some new markets all over the world. And we are seeing an increase in demand and interest from places like Japan and other countries. So it's a really great opportunity to get together with ONB and other New Brunswick businesses and take this opportunity to find some of those new markets and countries that really want to support Canada at a time like this and want some of the best products that are made in this country, which are made here in New Brunswick. The next piece of our plan is our interprovincial trade barriers work. So I continue to be engaged around the national table, particularly last Friday in Ottawa for another First Ministers meeting, talking about how New Brunswick is leading the way on labour mobility and how we have recognized that any Canadian credential earned in another province in Canada is going to be recognized here in New Brunswick, and that those people can get to work the first day that they arrive in our province, and that'll help our businesses and our economy move quickly because there's a lot of time spent in that wait and red tape and cost to get the person that you need on the job for the project that you're trying to deliver. There's also the work that we're doing with the other provinces in Atlantic Canada and with the rest of the country to take down the regulatory barriers that add cost and challenge to doing business in Canada. Alors, on continue ce travail.
I'm encouraged by the fact that, by comments that we've received from Quebec, Nova Scotia, and other provinces to limit the internal trade barriers between our provinces in order to improve access to new markets for New Brunswick, but access also to clients throughout Canada. Bon, j'ai fait les ouvrières, les barrières commerciales internes. Les derniers que je vais mentionner, the next one I will talk about are the...
I don't need to encourage you to do that because you have been doing it in spades, New Brunswick, and I want to say thank you for that. J'apprécie énormément chaque fois.
It's greatly appreciated every time I hear about a business here in New Brunswick that says that there are local purchases have been going way up because they're seeing more and more opportunities with local clients and throughout Canada. This makes a difference. Buy New Brunswick and Canadian products and really just stop buying American products like we've been doing here at the government. That makes a difference.
It's starting to be noticed in the U.S. that we have stopped going there. We have stopped our bookings there. We have stopped buying their products. And we've even stopped supplying some of our goods to them. And it's starting to destabilize and create rumblings from the United States. And so it's working. Keep doing it. Buy New Brunswick made, and thank you for that. The last piece I want to talk about is next week. We expect news from Washington on the tariffs on April 2nd. The best information I have right now, and I will say with a caveat that it changes every few days, as we saw yesterday, but we are optimistic that we will not be faced with a 25% tariff across our economy, but rather a tariff at a reduced rate on a reduced list of goods. What that reduced rate is, I can't say. I could guesstimate 10%, 15%, but less than 25%. What that reduced list of goods is, at this point we're looking at steel and aluminum and auto imports. We anticipate more things will be added, but it's some measure of progress that it will be less than 25% and less than all goods that come from Canada. Alors ça, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on imagine va venir.
So that's what we think is going to come, but that may change. We are optimistic because the work is. They're working very hard. The Minister and Minister LeBlanc are working hard, and we are continuing our conversations with governors and senators and other people from who are business leaders in the United States, and little by little are seeing the impact of those tariffs on their state and their business. So we are cautiously optimistic as to what's coming on April 2nd, that it will not be the worst case scenario.
Toronto next Thursday, selling New Brunswick to people that want to invest in our province and our economy here. And because we expect the news to come out on Wednesday of next week, I'm going to be doing this weekly update next Wednesday. The time is not yet confirmed, sometime probably between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, depending on when we get the news from Washington. And then certainly Team Canada and the First Ministers are looking to get together quite quickly after we get the word from Washington to prepare what our response looks like and finalize what those actions, additional actions in terms of retaliatory tariffs, additional actions in terms of other impacts to the U.S. will be. So you won't see me here next Thursday, but plan for Wednesday afternoon. And as soon as we get news from Washington, we will be here with you to let you know how New Brunswick's response is changing and what else is happening. Je vais vous rassurer qu'on va être ici.
I assure you that we'll be here each week, but it will not be Thursday, it'll be Wednesday. And once we know what the reality will be for tariffs, at this time we think they will be reduced from 25% and on not as many products will be covered. And once we have the news, perhaps after a meeting, we'll try to meet as Team Canada, and we'll be here at that point to share all this with you.
With the automobile tariffs, you can access our tariff relief package. With the Chinese tariffs, you can access our tariff relief package. Municipalities who are seeing impacts can access our tariff relief package. The team here at GNB is ready to take your calls and make sure we have the flexible support to get you through this, and then keep buying New Brunswick made and buying local, and we will get through this storm and be stronger on the other side. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Premier.
Thank you.
We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. We do have a limited time for questions, so each reporter will have a question and the quickest follow-up. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Just to let you know, I will be alternating between members of the media who are present in this room and those online. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Nous disposons d'un temps limité pour les questions. C'est pourquoi je vais alterner entre les organismes de presse. Chaque journaliste a un droit à une question et un suivi très rapide. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle. John Chilbeck, Post Media.
As you know, the tariffs from China on seafood is in response to our 100% tariffs on electric vehicles they're producing. How firm are you with the rest of the provinces on supporting that tariff on electric vehicles from China? Could you give your thoughts on that and whether it should be reduced to encourage the Chinese to take off our tariffs on lobster and crab?
There's definitely a conversation happening both around the First Minister's table and then between the federal government and China about that. Part of the move to put 100% tariff on Chinese EVs was in partnership with the United States, because both of our countries see China as a bigger threat. And so there is concern that removing the tariff on Chinese vehicles will make our relationship and situation in negotiating with the U.S. worse. So we're weighing options negotiations and evaluating what can be done to diminish or eliminate the Chinese tariffs while still ensuring that our work to eliminate or reduce the U.S. tariffs is on the right track.
So I just want you, but how do you feel about it?
Well, certainly I don't want to see a 25% tariff on seafood from China or from the United States, because seafood is a huge part of New Brunswick's economy and identity, and we don't want to make things more challenging for our businesses here in New Brunswick. And I think that there are EVs out there that folks can have access to from a number of other countries. But I think that we have to do these negotiations in parallel. Can we reduce or remove that EV tariff with China and still retain the outcome that we want on the tariffs with the U.S.? At the end of the day, the U.S. is a much bigger market for our seafood than the Chinese market is. So we have to weigh them out and understand, at the end of the day, I want the best access possible to the U.S. market with the lowest or zero tariffs there. And then reducing the tariffs in China is secondary. And so if we can make sure that we're doing the right moves in both of those places to eliminate both of those tariffs, that's why it's a negotiation both with China and the U.S.
Vicki Hogarth, CHCO, unmute your microphone and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Premier Holt, I apologize for sounding like a bit of a record, but according to the mayor of Campobello, sports teams are no longer wanting to travel to the island through the U.S., which means students of the local school are not able to have the same educational experience as other New Brunswick students. I'm just wondering if there's any talk at this point in time about potentially funding the seasonal ferry to start earlier. It's still 3 months away from the start date.
Thanks for the question, Vicki. And you don't sound like a broken record at all. Interestingly, the mayor of Campobello and others aren't the only ones looking at sports travel to and through the U.S. We had students from Harborview High that were in the legislature the other day expressing some of their own concerns about tournaments on the other side of the border and whether those were trips that they should be making or how they would be received on the other side. And the conversations about a seasonal ferry and the timing of the seasonal ferry, those have been looped in with the longer-term conversation about what the permanent solution is for Campobello, as well as the shorter-term conversation about how do we support the island with exemptions and what's happening for residents of Campobello at the border. So we do not want to see, those students are already, like yesterday and a year ago, the last time I was on Campobello, I had teachers and parents expressing to me the frustration that it's always them that travels to the mainland for tournaments and sporting activities, and it's practically never other teams that are coming to Campobello to compete, and it's not equitable. And so there's a challenge there that needs to be addressed, and having sort of ferry access to get to Deer Island and to get over to the mainland is one piece of it, and making sure that New Brunswickers know that thankfully we're watching the borders. The volumes are much, much lower of New Brunswickers going into the U.S., but we are watching carefully the treatment of New Brunswickers as they pass through the U.S., whether it's for sports events or otherwise, to make sure that people are safe and that they're being looked after by us and by our friends in Maine.
Ms. Hogarth, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. On that note of exemptions, how has the federal election complicated any attempts to get exemptions for islanders on the tariffs they pay on just basic needs?
Yeah, it has, in that we've been pushing with the federal government and have been in conversations with them practically daily about getting those exemptions carved out. And of course now we're being told it's caretaker mode, but that hasn't stopped the team at IGA from engaging. There's been proposed solutions that are a little softer, that we would prefer to see an exemption put in place than just be reassured that the border agents are being very flexible and are treating people in a friendly way. That's not something you can take to the bank. We want to see an exemption put in place. So we haven't had success with the federal government yet to get that yes or get that enacted, but we haven't stopped pushing them to do it.
That was Premier Susan Holt at the Tariff Press Conference this week. I wanted to get in a question in that conference about exemptions simply because we are in an election right now, and that makes it extremely difficult to get an answer from the federal government.
Yeah, any dissolution of parliament results in what's called caretaker mode of the government, so that means no decisions are made or taken away. So there's kind of nothing happening really at the federal level until there is a new government selected.
And April 28th, the election day, might not seem that far away, but if you are an Islander, that feels very far away. I think for us at CHCO, as we plan events like Meet the Candidates, it seems very close as we are in this environment of election. And I want to touch on something as we head towards Meet the Candidates, because there will be that in-person audience this year. I do want to stress that we really hope that we can maintain as a community, with likely hundreds of us at this event, a level of civility that we can all be proud of, that when we put that broadcast out into the world, we represent ourselves as Southwest New Brunswickers very proudly, that in these polarizing times, we can maintain a certain level of decorum and neighborly love of one another. Well, thank you for joining us on This Week Uncut. Stay tuned for Nathalie next week on Good Day from the Bay, but join us again next week as well. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.